Would you destroy a 400-year-old ancient woodland just to build some flats? It would be equivalent to destroying a grove of sequoias in America. It's a crazy idea. Hi, so I'm Anna Maria Cahalane, and I am chair of a charity here in London, and we're a charity that's trying to save this piece of ancient woodland. It's the closest ancient woodland to the City of London, and it's a surviving fragment of the Great North Wood. So once upon a time, for miles and miles around us was woodland, thick, dense woodland with wolves and all sorts of wild creatures. Nearly all of that is now gone. There's barely any fragments of it left. But right here where I'm standing is one of those fragments. Unfortunately, it's threatened with development. I'm surrounded by the most beautiful trees. Many of them are coppice trees because it would have been a managed woodland at some point. There's hawthorn trees that are a couple of hundred years old. There's over there's a field maple that's even older, one of the oldest trees in London. And it's just a stunning, beautiful environment that attracts all sorts of wildlife. And to think that it could be flattened down and have a block of flats doesn't bear thinking about. You wouldn't destroy a cathedral and build a block of flats. And that's how important this woodland is. It's old, it's ancient. The trees here were around in 1600. So they were around when we still had witch trials. They were around before tea was even introduced to the UK. They were around before the plague. So these trees have grown here and they've survived here for all these years. And to knock them down to build flats when there's other areas that would be more suitable would just be ludicrous. This is about profit for individuals who've just bought up plots of land and they want to build flats there.
So what's our connection with America then?
The connections with America are really interesting. Where we are standing now, right here, used to be owned by a family called the Colgate family. And this was around between 1814 up to about the 1860s. And the Colgate family, a wonderful family. There were a family of sisters and a mum for the most part of their time here, because the father, George Colgate, passed away when he was quite young. But they had a very interesting visitor that came to visit them in about 1850s. And this visitor was called Elihu Burritt. And Elihu Burritt was an American. And he was an American who believed in sort of the League of Brotherhood. He believed in that everybody should be equal. So he was an anti-slavery protester, and he was very well respected. He was very close to Abraham Lincoln and was made Consul General in England by Abraham Lincoln. And he was also friends with Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables. And he basically, because the trains had just arrived, and you'll hear them going back behind us, because the trains had just arrived in the UK in sort of the 1840s, he thought it'd be a really good idea to use the trains to go and tour around the UK and to spread his message of peace. So one of the places he stayed was here, which used to be part of Brockley Green Farm. And he loved it so much, and he was made so welcome here, that he made it his home every time he visited the UK, and that was very often. And he wrote diaries that mention here, and he talked about it being his home. And he brought his niece along with him one year, called Anna Strickland, and she came and stayed with the Colgate sisters, and they became really close friends. And she brought over some American corn, and they had great fun popping the corn over Christmas over the fire. So there's some wonderful stories, but that connection with America this is the only bit that's still here that would connect us, you know what I mean? Nothing else. Everything else around is just, houses, roads, buildings, and there's nothing where he once walked. So he would have walked across where we're standing now.
Wow, you see, that thought there is just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Just to think that we're in the presence of Mr. Burritt.
Yeah, it changes the way you see everything. Once you read about the lives of the people, who lived here and who cared for this space.
Yeah.
And who looked after the trees, because there's in some of the trees there's pleaches in the trees, which is an ancient way of making hedgerows. And to think that the farmer, George Colgate, would have been the man that made that pleach, and I'm just putting my hand on it, it kind of gives you goosebumps.
Can I just ask you keep mentioning Colgate. Are we talking about the same Colgates in America?
Connected, yes. So George Colgate, who was the father of the Colgate sisters here, he was first cousins with William Colgate, and William Colgate is the Colgate who started the Colgate toothpaste empire in America. So they fled the UK because they were threatened with imprisonment. So him and his father were pro-revolutionary. So they were watching very much the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and they were kind of gearing people up to have a bit of a revolution here in the UK. And because they were doing that, they had to be imprisoned. But the father was went to school with William Pitt the Younger, who was Prime Minister at the time. So William Pitt the Younger sent a message to him that he needed to flee. So he literally left the country and went over to America. And then him and his son started the toothpaste empire. So yeah, first cousins, pretty close.
Incredible, isn't it? We've got the link with our friends across the pond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is it going to be important for them to actually, let's say, sponsor or donate to us?
It's important to them because it's a living piece of history. And we always talk about the special relationship between America and the UK. And this is what that special relationship is all about. It's about, Elihu Burritt was all about, he brought in the, something called the Ocean Post, which was basically a cheap way of writing. And it was so that people could communicate across the sea, and that they could share their thoughts about peace and equality. So it was between America and the UK back then. And interestingly, I've been emailing America. So I've been emailing Pennsylvania and the Peace Archives and a wonderful lady called Wendy over there. And it almost feels like we're doing the same thing, but instead of using letters, we're using email. And we're both sharing. She was telling me what was happening over there on the day that Trump lost his presidency. During the COVID experience, and I was emailing her about what was happening here, and we were both talking about this woodland. It's kind of we felt very connected with each other, and I think for the legacy of Elihu Burritt and to keep his name alive, he's forgotten in the UK, which he shouldn't be, because of that relationship. And places like this, suddenly people are talking about him again. Because
he also had it. Correct me if I'm wrong. He had something to do with the women's movement as well, didn't he?
He had a very strong hand in the women's movement. So Elihu Burritt was interesting in that he recognised that women had influence and women could make changes. And this was at a time when women were not allowed, outside of the domestic environment, women weren't allowed to do anything, basically. So it was everything, education was at home, it was sewing, it was domestic crafts, etc. But he recognised that women were the one who chose the food. Women were the one who did the shopping. So if women had the power of money in their pocket, they could make choices about what they bought that was not derived from slave trade. So cotton, for example. So the first fair trade movement was actually started by Elihu Burritt. Again, it's something that nobody talks about. We see the fair trade coffee in our shops all the time, certainly in the UK, but we don't link it back to this American that came over to Brockley.
Incredible.
And also because he gave women the opportunity to form these groups and to organise themselves, they got the skills they needed to then start the suffragette movement. Without all those skills, the suffragette movement wouldn't have happened. They learned how to bank their money, they learned how to fundraise, they learned how to use their domestic crafts to make statements and slogans on their banners. And they became powerful, and they were allowed to give speeches. So Elizabeth Colgate, one of the Colgate sisters, she gave a speech that was noted in one of the newspapers at the time, which was about orphan children that shouldn't be made to go into the Navy. It was Dr. Bernardo, one of our charitable charities over here, he listened to her speech and changed his processes as a result of that.
Really?
So that was pretty amazing for women at the time.
Right.
And then, of course, they knew, hold on a minute, we can be equal in other ways. You know, we know we can change things. We know we've got skills. We know we've got intelligence, and we know we've got strength. And they went on then to move into the suffragette movement. So it's quite powerful. So it's called the Olive Leaf Circle. Again, that's a name that we're trying to bring back in our sort of our own projects and things.
Wouldn't it be great if we could find some form of connection with our American friends? If anything's, is it still running over there, that type of organisation?
Well,
is it called something else or what?
It would be amazing. It would be great to find out, and that's where these links are quite important.
Yeah.
It would be lovely to have more of a connection with America.
Yeah.
So that we can share these stories and share. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff from Wendy in the Peace Archives,
right,
but I haven't got anything beyond that. So these conversations would be amazing if we could partner up with our American friends. Without a doubt. Sure.
Now, I mean, how much money have you got to raise?
We need to raise 100,000. We've just passed the 50,000 mark,
Woo-hoo!
Which
fantastic.
is amazing.
Yeah, well done.
Which is fantastic. And we've had a couple of large donations from wonderful local people, and we've also done loads of fundraisers, loads of open days, loads of events, and people are giving, you know, £5, £20, and it's wonderful. It's hard work. It really is.
Now, I'm actually led to believe that you had one donor,
yes,
who came down.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
Well, we've got a parent who lives locally, and she is very passionate about wildlife, very passionate about preserving green space for children, especially in a time of climate emergency. So she was interested in our project, and she said she would like to visit the Woodland, and if she was confident, she would give us £1,000 towards our project, which was amazing. So she came up, and she just had a baby. And her baby was like strapped on the papoose, and she was walking around the sleeping baby, and we showed her one of our trees, which is quite incredible, which is a 400-year-old field maple tree, and we were basically explaining to her how the younger field maples that have come, like her children, have all come along this side because she's controlling the carbon to feed her children, because she knows that they wouldn't survive on the other side of her where all the elms are growing. And basically this theory is called the mother tree. So we were talking about the mother tree, and I think it seemed to really touch her, because she went away. The next day she emailed, and she basically said, all I can think about all night is the mother tree and saving her babies. And the £1,000 turned into £10,000. So
incredible, isn't it?
She just said, we have to save these trees.
Yeah.
It's just what we've got to do. It's the right thing, really.
I think the other thing I need to know, and maybe the people we're talking to need to know, how big is this place? How much land have we got?
It's not huge. It's a couple of acres. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to look back and see the exact, because it's stretched along a railway cutting. Yeah. So it's quite long and it's linear. It's a small fragment of the Great North Wood, but it's got some of the oldest trees. The railway cutting is about 4.5 kilometres in total. Yeah. And this part we're standing is the most important part for wildlife. Yeah. So, yes.
So the other thing, we hear those trains rattling by, regularly.
Yes.
Here comes another one. How far are we from London?
We're not far at all. I'd say we're about 12 minutes on the train. Really, really close. You can just jump on the train just down the road at Brockley, and literally it's about 3 stops.
Right,
and we're in London.
Because we've got a distinction to make. I think we've got Greater London.
Yes.
Yeah, which is huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's.
But the City of London.
The City of London, is much.
It's that square mile, isn't it?
Yes.
So the guys in 12 minutes could also be enjoying London and experiencing the historic side of that as well.
And this is the closest ancient woodland to the City of London. We've done the measurements. So
Really?
it's the closest fragment to the City of London, which is another reason it needs to be saved. How amazing is that?
Oh yeah, without doubt. The one thing, listen to this, listen.
It's also the second oldest passenger train line in London.
Is it really?
Yes.
It's that sound of, dancing clickety-clack, clickety-clack.
Yeah. But what's great, if it wasn't for the railways being cut through this land, this woodland wouldn't have survived, which is quite interesting. A lot of our best wildlife habitats are all along railway corridors. Right. Because they're basically unbroken green corridors in which wildlife can travel. So a lot of those species that are threatened with extinction, like our hedgehogs, if it wasn't for these corridors, they would have been extinct a long time
Yeah.
ago.
So with our friends across the pond,
Yes.
yeah, if they want to make a donation, how do they do that?
We have a site, a local giving site, which is our platform for donations. So they just need to go onto our appeal. So the fourth reserve. So we're called the fourth reserve because we're the fourth nature reserve along the corridor,
Okay.
along this 4.5 mile corridor.
Yeah.
So they would go onto the local giving and go into the appeal for the Gorne Wood, which
Yeah.
is what this is called, and they just need to make a donation. Or they can email us and discuss it,
Yeah.
and they can also make something called a pledge. So if they don't want to put money in straight away, they can say, I will pledge you £5,000 at a later point once the sale starts to go through.
Oh, amazing!
So
Right.
as long as they sign that to say they're giving a pledge, then the solicitors will count that in our fundraising.
Well, that's
so
good news, isn't
it's
it?
fourth.reserve@yahoo.com is our email address.
What we'll do is we'll put all those details up for them.
That'd be amazing,
They're not
thank
going to be a problem. I mean, the thing for me is, when you think about the history that's here and the history that some of the Americans are connected to,
Yeah.
what an amazing experience to come down and get here,
Yeah.
and walk amongst.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love, once we buy it, and we will buy it, we will love to have some Americans over. We can do some wonderful walks and talks. It would be just fantastic. If you're into hammocking, we could have a hammocking night amongst the trees. Who knows?
Our American friends are into anything, yeah.
Yeah, and of course we'd always share where somebody's done something good for us. So obviously in our newsletters, on our website, we'd love to kind of share their stories and why they were interested in here, and would make you very, very welcome in the UK.
So are there any other interesting pointers or facts that, we've got links back with our American friends?
Yes, one of the most interesting is regarding a guy called Lesley Paul, who started a movement called the Woodcraft Folk. Now, the Woodcraft Folk isn't so big in the UK. There are some small groups, but it's much bigger in America. Now, Lesley Paul just lived down the road, literally, and he's got a blue plaque outside his house. And when Lesley Paul started off, he started off as a scout locally, and at that time they did a lot of outdoor pursuits. They did a lot of putting their tents up and all that kind of stuff. This is back in 1912 sort of period. Now, this woodland would have been the closest woodland to Lesley Paul and also to the scout troops locally, and we know that all those scout troops used these woods. So we're pretty confident that Lesley Paul would have used these woods when he was scouting, and these woods would have been the inspiration behind him starting the Woodcraft Folk movement. So we haven't got any specific reference, but the circumstances are so close that we're pretty sure this is where he came and this is where he played, and these are the trees on which he climbed. So that's pretty special.
So if he started that movement, have we got the link with America then?
In terms of it's a club for kids basically that is still alive today, and in America it's thriving.
Is it really?
Yeah, here the Scouts is still probably the big movement for kids. So you've got the Boy Scouts and the Guides.
Right.
Whereas Lesley Paul, he left the Scouts because he felt it wasn't focused enough on wildlife. It was also single sex, whereas he felt that boys and girls should be able to play together and learn together. So that's why he splintered off from the Scouts and started the Woodcraft Folk movement. So huge connection to America in the sense that the starter of their clubs for kids used to live down the road here and played in these woods.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So it's almost like, for me, it's like, all right, all you woodcrafters, get yourself over. Come and see where it all began.
Yeah, that would be great.
Wouldn't it?
Pitch up some tents and do some bug hunting.
There you go. Hey, there's just so much to this, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
Am I right in saying there's a Roman road round here?
There is. So just on this side of the woodland, so there's so many strands to this woodland. It's incredible. But another reason is there's an archaeological priority designation on this area here because a Roman way goes right through it. So the Roman way stretches from Lewes in Sussex and goes all the way to London. And on Sunday, actually, we've got some lovely people doing a cycle and walk from Lewes to London to raise money for this project.
Oh, right.
But it does mean that we might have Roman remains, pottery, and along the stretch, certainly where there's been digging, people have found pottery and things like that. So that's another historical importance for this site as well.
You've got enough for everybody here, haven't you?
Yeah, we really do have. It's also a locally important geological site. It's got these stones called septarian nodules, and basically they're 2 million years old, but because this is such a deep railway cutting, they had to dig about 90 foot below ground level to make the railway. We can see a layer of earth that most people can't see. So we've got some septarian nodules that are in situ. It's the only place in London where you can see them in situ.
Incredible. So
people who are fascinated with what's under the earth and how the earth is made, it's another interesting part of the visit here. So you've got history, you've got wildlife, you've got suffragettes, you've got the Woodcraft Folk movement, you've got Elihu Burritt and the anti-slavery movement, all wrapped up in these trees. They shouldn't be turned into flats. So although we've done really well so far, we haven't got long left to raise the money. We've got about 3 months to raise the equivalent of $60,000, which is about $20,000 a month. So we really do need your help to secure this land, this heritage landscape for the future, to make sure that we can invite you over here and celebrate with you when it happens. So please donate, or if you can't donate, get in touch and talk to us about what you can offer or how you can help. We think this is a magical place and well worth every penny. So we really look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Details here.